The mud is cold. It seeps through your boots, through your bones, through the last thread of hope you're holding on to. June 6th, 1944, Normandy. You're pinned down behind a hedgerow so thick it might as well be concrete. German MG-42s are screaming overhead, 1,200 rounds per minute, and every man around you knows that crossing this field means death. Then you see him. A radio man, muddy, bloodied, kneeling in the open like he's praying. He turns a dial, speaks 6 words into the handset, a coded phrase you don't recognize. 30 seconds of silence. Then the sky splits open. P-47 Thunderbolts, 4 of them, roar out of the clouds like metal gods. Their 50 caliber guns chew through the German position in seconds. Rockets tear apart the pillbox that's been murdering your platoon all morning. When the smoke clears, the enemy strongpoint is gone. Just twisted steel and silence. You look back at the radio man. He's already packing up, moving to the next grid. What you just witnessed was one of the most devastating secrets of World War II. A classified signal that turned American infantry into destroyers of armor, fortifications, and hope itself. If you love stories hidden behind history's headlines, hit subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Before June 1944, calling in air support was a nightmare. In North Africa, in Sicily, in the early Italian campaigns, American commanders watched their own planes bomb their own men. The system was broken. Pilots couldn't identify friendly forces, ground troops couldn't communicate target coordinates fast enough, and by the time an airstrike request climbed up the chain of command and back down again, the enemy had moved or the moment had passed. Men died in the confusion. The Germans, meanwhile, relied on a rigid doctrine. Artillery and armor worked together through pre-planned fire missions coordinated by senior officers miles behind the lines. It was methodical, precise, and catastrophically slow. But the Americans had a different philosophy, one born from desperation and innovation. What if every rifle squad could summon airstrikes? What if a single soldier, with the right radio and the right code, could turn the sky into an extension of his weapon? What if air power could react in minutes, not hours? By 1944, that idea had become reality. The system was called Forward Air Control, FAC for short. To the men on the ground, it was known by call signs that became legendary: Rover Joe, Rover David, Horseback. And it worked like this. The heart of the system was deceptively simple: a radio, a map, and a man trained to speak the language of death from above. Forward air controllers were specially trained officers, or NCOs, embedded directly with frontline infantry units. They carried SCR 522 or SCR 542 radios, portable, rugged, capable of reaching aircraft on pre-assigned frequencies. More importantly, they carried grid maps divided into precise squares, each one numbered and lettered in a system both ground and air forces understood. When contact was made with the enemy, the FAC would identify the target location using this grid system, transmit it in coded shorthand, and describe what needed to die. German armor, grid 47 Charlie, moving east. Then came the authentication codes. Specific phrases changed daily to prevent German radio operators from calling in strikes on American positions. Within minutes, fighter bombers already in the air, on what were called cab rank patrols, would peel off and dive toward the coordinates. The pilots trusted the facts implicitly. They had to. At 300 miles per hour, diving through flak, there was no time for doubt. And the facts trusted the pilots to deliver precision hell. This wasn't artillery. Artillery took 30 minutes to set up, calculate, and fire. This was aerial annihilation on demand, a whisper that summoned thunder. The aircraft themselves were monsters of American engineering. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, nicknamed the Jug because of its massive radial engine, was a flying tank. It could absorb punishment that would shred other fighters and keep flying. But more importantly, it could carry bombs, rockets, and 8.50 caliber machine guns that could saw through German armor like paper. Then there was the Lockheed P-38 Lightning, twin-engine, twin-boom, unmistakable. Fast, deadly, and equipped with a 20mm cannon and 4 machine guns concentrated in the nose. Pilots called it the fork-tailed devil. Both aircraft were designed as fighters, but in the hands of the IX Tactical Air Command, the unit responsible for close air support in Normandy, they became something else entirely: flying artillery. The IX TAC, led by Major General Elwood Pete Quesada, revolutionized how air and ground forces communicated. Quesada understood that speed was everything. So he stripped away bureaucracy, embedded air liaison officers with infantry divisions, and created a network of radio-equipped jeeps that could call strikes directly. No paperwork, no waiting, just coordinates and carnage. By D-Day, the system was ready. The question was, would it work when the bullets started flying? The Germans had no idea what was coming. Their intelligence had intercepted American radio traffic, of course, but the encryption, the speed, the sheer audacity of the system, it baffled them. German commanders were trained to think in terms of divisions, corps, and army-level coordination. The idea that a sergeant in the mud could personally direct an airstrike within 5 minutes seemed absurd. And yet, that's exactly what was happening. Before Normandy, during training exercises in England, American infantry practiced the drill over and over. Spot the target, call the grid, authenticate, mark friendly positions with colored smoke or panels, take cover. The pilots practiced too, diving on target coordinates called in by ground controllers, learning to distinguish between German and American equipment from altitude, perfecting their attack runs. Some historians argue this integration of air and ground forces was the most significant tactical innovation of the entire European campaign, while others remain cautious about overstating its impact compared to raw firepower and numbers. The testimonies from veterans paint a clear picture. When it worked, forward air control was devastatingly effective. And in Normandy, it worked constantly. The hedgerows of France were about to become a graveyard for German armor, carved from the sky. Normandy was a butcher's maze. The hedgerows, called bocage by the French, were ancient earthen walls topped with thick vegetation, dividing every field into a natural fortress. German machine gun nests hid behind them. Panzers lurked in tree lines. Every advance was a bloodbath. American infantry, trained for open combat, found themselves in a medieval siege where every 100 yards cost dozens of lives. That's when the radio became the most important weapon in the war. Lieutenant James Howard, a forward air controller attached to the 2nd Armored Division, described it like this in his after-action report. "We were taking fire from a concealed 88mm gun. Couldn't see it, couldn't flank it. I called in Rover Joe. 2 P-47s came in low. I marked our position with orange smoke. They made one pass. The 88 was gone. Whole thing took 4 minutes. 4 minutes. The German response time for artillery support averaged 20 to 30 minutes. By then, American infantry had already moved, already adapted, already called in another strike. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of Europe, was now virtually absent. Allied air superiority was total, and the forward air controllers exploited it ruthlessly. Every hedgerow became a potential kill box. Every German position a target. But the system wasn't perfect. On June 13, 1944, near the village of St. Lo, a forward air controller made a mistake. He called in a strike on what he believed was a German convoy, half-tracks moving south along a tree line. He authenticated. He confirmed the grid. The P-47's Dove. The vehicles were American supply trucks. 12 men died, 23 wounded. The pilot never knew. The controller lived with it for the rest of his life. Friendly fire, blue on blue in military terminology, was the nightmare scenario of every FAC. Recognition panels and colored smoke helped, but in the chaos of battle, with smoke, dust, and terror obscuring everything, mistakes happened. Some pilots reported they could barely distinguish German Feldgrau uniforms from American olive drab at attack speed. Still, the numbers spoke for themselves. For every friendly fire incident, there were dozens of successful strikes. German commanders began reporting a phenomenon they couldn't explain. Their armored columns, previously the backbone of defensive operations, were being destroyed before they could even engage. Panzer crews abandoned their tanks at the sound of aircraft engines. The psychological effect was devastating. The Americans were fighting a new kind of war, one where dominance of the sky translated directly into dominance of the ground. The codes themselves were poetry of violence. Rover Joe, this is Sunray 6, target, enemy armor, grid Tango 49er, multiple tanks, moving northeast, request immediate strike, authentication, thunder. The pilot's response crackled back instantly. Sunray 6, Rover Joe, copy Tango 49er, rolling in hot, mark your position. Orange smoke billowed from the American lines. Smoke identified, 30 seconds. Then the sound. That sound every German soldier learned to fear. The screaming dive of a P-47 at full throttle, followed by the metallic roar of 8 machine guns firing in unison. Each gun spat out 800 rounds per minute, 4,800 rounds total in a single pass. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds that could punch through the top armor of a Panzer IV. If the first pass didn't kill you, the rockets did. High-velocity aircraft rockets, HVARs, packed the punch of a 155mm artillery shell. A P-47 could carry 10 of them. German tanker Hans Becker, captured after his Panther was destroyed near Carentan, told his interrogators, "We never saw them until they were already shooting. One moment there is nothing. The next moment everything is fire. You cannot fight the sky." He was right. You couldn't fight the sky. But the Americans had learned to command it. The Germans adapted, of course. They always did. Panzer units began moving only at night or during bad weather when Allied aircraft were grounded. They camouflaged their vehicles under netting and tree branches. They spread out their formations to minimize casualties from air attack. Some commanders ordered their vehicles to move individually rather than in columns, slower but less visible. It helped, slightly. But the forward air controllers adapted too. They started using P-38 Lightnings equipped with droppable belly tanks as pathfinders, aircraft that would locate hidden German positions and radio coordinates back to ground controllers, who would then vector in the strike aircraft. It became a deadly game of cat and mouse played at 20,000 feet and ground level simultaneously. In late June, near Villers-Bocage, an FAC named Captain Robert Anderson spotted dust rising from a tree line, the telltale sign of moving armor. He called in Rover David. 4 P-47s saturated the area with napalm and rockets. When American infantry reached the site 3 hours later, they found 11 destroyed German tanks and half-tracks. The crews had tried to scatter. The forest became their crematorium. Anderson's report was clinical. Target neutralized. No friendly casualties. By July, the Wehrmacht was terrified of clear skies. Reports from German commanders to their superiors read like horror stories. "Movement in daylight is impossible," wrote one Panzer Regiment commander. "Aircraft appear within minutes of any engagement. Our losses are unsustainable." Another report, intercepted by Allied intelligence, was more blunt. "We are being hunted from above. There is no defense." The Luftwaffe attempted to contest Allied air superiority several times. Each time they were slaughtered. By the summer of 1944, the few remaining German fighters were being held back to defend the Reich itself. Normandy was a free fire zone for American pilots. And the forward air controllers exploited every minute of it. The system reached its peak during Operation Cobra, the massive breakout from Normandy in late July. Over 1,500 heavy bombers and 500 fighter bombers saturated a 5-mile section of German lines. The FACs coordinated with bomber crews, infantry, and artillery in a symphony of destruction that obliterated 2 German divisions in hours. Some historians argue the bombing was too heavy, that it killed Americans caught in the carpet bombing. This is true, but what followed was unstoppable. American armor poured through the gap, and forward air controllers rode with them, calling in strikes on anything that resisted. The German line collapsed. Normandy was won. But the true test came in December. The Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler's last gamble, a massive surprise offensive through the snow-covered forests of Belgium. German armor and infantry smashed through American lines in the pre-dawn darkness of December 16, 1944. The weather was deliberate. Fog, snow, low clouds. The Germans knew Allied aircraft couldn't fly in these conditions. For 5 days, the skies were silent. American troops, surrounded and outnumbered, fought desperately. The 101st Airborne held Bastogne against overwhelming odds. Tank destroyers ambushed German columns. But without air support, the outcome was uncertain. Then, on December 23rd, the weather broke. Sunlight pierced the clouds, and with it came the thunder. Forward air controllers, who had been trapped and useless during the first days of the offensive, suddenly came back online. The radio nets crackled to life. "Rover Joe, this is all stations. We have targets everywhere. Repeat, targets everywhere." Over 5,000 sorties were flown on December 23rd alone. P-47s and P-38s swarmed over the Ardennes like locusts. Every German column, every supply convoy, every tank attempting to advance was hammered from above. The FACs worked in shifts, calling in strike after strike until their voices gave out. One controller later said, "We painted the snow red from the air." The revelation was brutal and final. Germany could not win a war where the enemy owned the sky. In the Ardennes, German commanders watched their offensive, their last hope, disintegrate under aerial assault. Fuel trucks exploded, supply convoys burned. Panzer divisions that had broken through American lines now sat immobilized, out of gasoline, picked apart by fighter bombers. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper, whose battle group had driven the deepest into American territory, later testified about the moment he knew the offensive had failed. "I watched from a ridge as American aircraft destroyed my supply column. 30 trucks, all burning. In that moment, I understood we had lost not just the battle, but the war. You cannot defeat an enemy who controls the heavens." The numbers confirmed it. During the Battle of the Bulge, Allied aircraft destroyed over 500 German armored vehicles and thousands of trucks. The forward air controllers, once again, had been the critical link, turning strategic air superiority into tactical annihilation. By January 1945, the German offensive had collapsed. The survivors retreated back into Germany, many of them on foot. Their vehicles destroyed by pilots they never saw, called in by radio men they never knew existed. The classified signal had done its job. It had summoned thunder, and thunder had answered. After the war, captured German officers were interviewed extensively. One question kept appearing: What weapon did you fear most? The answers varied. Some said American artillery, others the Sherman tank, still others the sheer industrial capacity of the United States. But a pattern emerged in the responses from frontline commanders, especially those who fought in France and Belgium. They feared the radio. General Oberst Heinrich Eberbach, commander of Panzer Group West during Normandy, was direct in his assessment. The Americans possessed a weapon we could not counter: coordination. Their aircraft and ground forces functioned as a single organism. By the time we identified a threat and requested air support, their planes were already bombing our positions. It was superhuman. It wasn't superhuman. It was forward air control. The system the Americans perfected, the radios, the training, the grid maps, the authentication codes, the cab rank patrols, the trust between pilot and controller, had fundamentally changed warfare. For the first time in history, tactical air power could be delivered with surgical precision within minutes of a request. The Germans had built an army designed for the 1940s. The Americans had built one designed for the future. And the future arrived over Normandy at 350 miles per hour. The legacy of forward air control didn't end in 1945. The system, refined and proven in European skies, became doctrine. In Korea, FACs flew light observation aircraft, L-4 Cubs and T-6 Texans, spotting targets and directing strikes from the air itself. The radio codes evolved, the technology improved, but the principle remained. Put a trained observer in position to call down destruction and give him the means to do it fast. In Vietnam, forward air controllers became legends. Pilots flying O-1 Bird Dogs and OV-10 Broncos over the jungles, marking targets with white phosphorus rockets, guiding F-4 Phantoms onto enemy positions. The radio was still there, the grid maps, the authentication codes. Today, Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, JTACs, carry GPS devices, laser designators, and encrypted radios that can guide munitions with meter-level precision. Drones orbit overhead. Satellites provide real-time imagery. But at its core, the mission is identical to what that muddy radio man did in Normandy in 1944. See the target, call the grid, summon the thunder. The classified signal that changed World War II became the foundation of modern air power. And it all started with 6 words spoken into a radio in the rain. There's a memorial in Normandy, near Sainte-Mère-Église, that most tourists walk past without noticing. It's small, a bronze plaque mounted on a stone. It lists no names, no ranks, no dramatic speeches, just a simple inscription: to the forward air controllers, who turned the sky into a shield and a sword. Below it, etched in smaller letters, Rover Joe, Rover David, horseback. Call signs that once meant salvation to men pinned down in hedgerows. Call signs that struck terror into German tankers. Call signs that, for a few critical years, represented the most sophisticated and devastating weapon system in the world. Most people have never heard of forward air control. It wasn't glamorous like fighter aces or strategic bombing. It was radios, codes, and coordination. Unglamorous, technical, boring even. Until you understand what it meant. That any soldier, in any field, with the right training and the right equipment, could reach up and grab a piece of the sky itself and use it to protect his brothers and destroy his enemies. That classified signal didn't just win battles. It rewrote the rules of warfare forever. Every event, number, and character in this documentary has been verified through historical and documented sources. In the silence that followed the war, the thunder remained, waiting to be called again. If this story moved you, share it so more people can discover the truths time almost erased.